IB Nation, how are y'all doing today? I hope you guys are doing good. I hope you guys are fired up. It is Friday, August 23rd, and that means two things. Number one, it means we're 8 days away from Notre Dame kicking off the 2024 season, and we are 1 day away from college football starting again. I have never been so excited for a Florida State Georgia Tech game in my entire life, but I'm definitely looking forward to watching that. Not only is it the start of the college football season, but those are two teams are both on Notre Dame's schedule here coming down the rest of the season. Cannot wait to watch that game and see how they're going to do. And then, of course, it's Friday free-for-all mailbag. So I'm excited for today. Just a reminder, mailbag is open to anybody that's watching the show. This is not a subscriber-only type of thing, so get your questions in. Just put an MB on there. Because I'm doing a solo show, it's a little harder to kind of scroll through things. So I'm just going to go top to bottom. We're going to do super chats as best I can, but we're going to go top to bottom and get this thing rocking and rolling. Apologize for the late start. We had a little bit of a bee infestation going in our house, and I have not been able to get a hold of anybody to come take care of that. So I had to go take care of that a little bit today. My wife is deathly allergic to bees. If she gets stung, I have to stab her in the leg with an EpiPen and call 911. And we were told by the vet that a bee sting could be something that causes Rita's IHMA to flare up again. So little dangerous to be right out on the deck, right outside of our door, that where all my girls go in and out of that sucker. So I had to take care of that. So I apologize for the late start, and I do actually kind of rather fond of bees and everything they do, but you know what? Today they got in the way of my family's health, and so they had to go. And so I'm gonna have to do a little bit more of that after the show. But I'm here. I'm ready to rock and roll. Hit MB or put the mailbag sign on there, and we will get to your question. And I'll tell you what, guys and gals, I'm excited for the season. I really am. I'm ready to kind of get this thing going. I'm going to try to get to as many questions as I can here between now and about 3 o'clock to 3:15. So without further ado, let's get rocking and rolling for today's mailbag. Okay, let's begin. I want to bring up this is a bit of a somber super chat, but I definitely wanted to get Bill's super chat up here. And Bill says, I have a friend. Thank you for the super chat, Bill, and Brent for bringing this to our attention. I have a friend, lifelong Notre Dame fan. They found a mass on his kidney, and he's going in for surgery. Please say a prayer for Chuck Ponzier. Keep up the great work, IB team. By far the best insights to all things Notre Dame. Like, share, subscribe, join the boards. Bill, we will definitely lift up Chuck in our prayers. I know as soon as this show is over, I'm kind of talking about it in my head right now, in my heart to God, but I will certainly lift him up after the show is over. And I'd ask all of you that believe in the power of prayer, like I do, to certainly lift up Chuck in your prayers, and keep us posted, Bill, on how things go and how Chuck is doing. So, and if Chuck is happening to be listening, just know there's a lot of folks praying for you. I went through this past week with my dog, Rita. It's amazing how many people reached out, offered prayers, offered support. And obviously, Chuck, this is someone who we want to lift up as well. So, Chuck, you'll be in our prayers, man. No doubt about it. And thank you for bringing that to our attention, Bill. Got a couple other super chats. Got one from John A1. Thank you, John. Happy Friday. Happy Friday to you too, my friend. I'm actually going to be in touch with you this weekend because we have a couple things we got to talk about. So I'm going to give you a shout this weekend. So be prepared for that, my friend. D-Troll Hunter with a super chat. Brian, please go through Conor Weigman's per game stats from 22 and 23. How did he do against high-level defenses? Well, I already kind of know the answer to this one, but we will certainly do that. And the answer is he didn't do very well. If you go back and look in 2022, his first start, let's pull this up, his first start, Conor Weigman's first start, I believe it was his first start. He came off the bench against South Carolina. His first start was against Ole Miss. He actually threw for 338 yards and 4 touchdowns, which is obviously a very good performance against the Ole Miss defense. Ole Miss doesn't have a great pass defense, but they're not terrible. They ranked in 2022 55th in the nation in yards allowed per game. And they ranked, it's Mississippi State, and they ranked 72nd in quarterback rating. So not good, but not absolutely awful either. And he performed well in that game. Next game against Auburn, not great. Completed 38.9% of his passes in that game against an Auburn secondary that ranked 25th in college football in quarterback rating that season. Went 11 of 19 for 191 yards against UMass. Good, per pass average. He was over 10 yards per attempt. UMass ranked 82nd in passing yards per attempt, and then had a solid game against LSU. They didn't ask him to do a whole lot that game. They ran the ball pretty well on LSU, and their defense did a nice job keeping LSU in check, but he went 12 of 18 for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. But, of course, as we know, LSU's pass defense was not the greatest. It was better in 2022 than it was in 2023, but it still wasn't very good in 2022. And then to kick off the 2023 season, he had a great game against New Mexico and their 132nd ranked pass defense in 2023. Went 18 of 23, 236 yards, 5 touchdowns. And then 2 games later against Louisiana Monroe and their 126th ranked pass defense, he went 25 of 29, 86.2% completion, 337 yards, and 1 touchdown. In between those 2 games, he played against Miami, Florida, who has the 33rd ranked pass defense quarterback rating from a quarterback rating standpoint last season, so much better test. He went 31 of 53, 58.5%. Not bad when you threw that many passes. 336 yards, not bad. Only 6.3 yards per attempt because he did throw a lot of passes. Threw 2 touchdowns, but also got picked off twice in a 15-point loss. And then, of course, last year against Auburn, who last season had the number 64 ranked pass defense. He went 8 of 14 for 57.1%, 70 yards, only 5.0 yards per attempt before he got knocked out. And then, of course, the season was over. Having said that, those all look really bad for Conor Weigman, right? And those are certainly not good numbers. Having said that, Conor Weigman's a true freshman in 2022, and he was only a true sophomore last year. So I'm actually very high on Conor Weigman, and I can understand why Texas A&M fans are high on him. My concern for Texas A&M fans is they're a lot like, honestly, a lot of SEC fans that I sometimes think that there's an overinflation of how good they are. And then there's a sometimes too high of an expectation on some of their younger players, and so they tend to lose patience with guys early. I hope that A&M fans are patient with Conor Weigman this season. I think he's a talented kid. It's going to take time to adjust to the defense he's going to be playing in, or the offense he's going to be playing in this season. He went from a pro-stylish system last year with Bobby Petrino, certainly pro-style the year before with a lot of the past concepts with Jimbo Fisher, to now he's going to a completely different type of college spread offense under Colin Klein. Very different read structure, a lot of different conceptual changes that he's going to have to deal with. Going to be some fundamental technical changes, a lot like what Sam Hartman went through last year. And as Notre Dame fans, we saw how a quarterback can have some struggles in big games when he's also having to not only mentally learn a new offense, but also learn new technique and learn new footwork and new ways of handing the ball off, dropping back and throwing. So there's a lot of changes that Conor Weigman is going to go through. I fully expect the A&M offense to struggle early. But as we've said during the offseason, I'd much rather play A&M in week 1 than I'd been playing them in week 9. And yes, I'm going to have Texas A&M predicted to lose this Notre Dame game because I think Notre Dame's a better team. They're in a better situation. They're just overall right now a better team. I also have Texas A&M beating Texas at the end of the year. I really like what Mike Elko's doing. They have a talented team. I don't think their talent is what some Notre Dame fans and Texas A&M fans think that it is, but it's still a talented football team, and Mike Elko is going to do very well there. But if you're thinking that Conor Weigman's going to come out in the first month of the season and just rip up a Notre Dame defense that shut down Drake May, shut down C.J. Stroud, shut down Caleb Williams this past season, shut down Jaron Hall, and I think you're up for a little bit of disappointment. Now, I could end up being wrong, but this is a team that's gone against really good quarterbacks the last 2 seasons, really good quarterbacks, and has shut them all down. And when Notre Dame has struggled, it's usually been their run game doesn't perform well. That's usually when Notre Dame has some issues. So I don't know that he's going to play overly well against Notre Dame. We'll see if it's enough for them to win the game. But I do like Conor Weigman. I do think he's going to be a good football player. My concern also with him is it's kind of like a lot like Tyler Buckner for Notre Dame. He's a guy that didn't play much as a freshman, came in the last 4 games. Or 4 of the last 5 games, I should say, then comes out in 23. He's kind of got the job. He's He's starting to do some things, make some mistakes against Miami, but those are things you learn from. You want to be able to apply them, but he never got the chance to do that because he got hurt again. So he misses the last 9 games of the season, and he lost some really important development time, not just from not being able to play in games, but not being able to practice. And we saw how that hurt Tyler Buckner in 2022 when he lost that much-needed year of development because he got hurt in Game 2. Conor Weigman got hurt in Game 4. Tyler was able to come back late in the year and practice late in the year, and Conor wasn't able to do that. So I feel for the kid, but the good news for him is he did get a red shirt last year, which is huge because he blew his red shirt in 2022, but he got one back last year, and I think he'll need it. But I'm high on Conor Weigman. I just don't know that this is the game that I'd be betting my mortgage that he's going to come out and look like the top 100 recruit that I had him being. And if you think that Conor Weigman's better than Riley Leonard right now, I think you're kind of getting into your fan mode, to be honest with you. With all due respect, we all have those moments, but Riley Leonard's clearly a better quarterback right now. Could Conor end up being a better quarterback down the road than Riley Leonard is right now? Sure, but he's not a better quarterback right now. And that's going to make it. He's going to have his hands full in that opener against what has been the last 2 years one of the best pass defenses in college football. It's going to be an interesting. Good question. Good question, Detroit. I got one from Iden Banami. Thank you, Iden. If you're Coach Marcus Freeman, do you let loose and run Riley and let him be free week 1 and the beginning of the season, or do you ease him into that? Well, it depends on how fall camp has gone. It appears to me that Notre Dame has been using Riley Leonard's legs in fall camp based on the videos that they've put out on their own. Look, I would use him as needed. That's what I would do. Am I going into the A&M game saying, looking at it from a Notre Dame coach's standpoint, are we going to go into this game if I'm Mike Denbrock, as you said, I'm Marcus Freeman. So are we going to go into this game and say, okay, we're going to have this kid run the ball 15, 20 times to win? That's our game plan. That's what we're going to do in order to win this game. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that for a host of reasons. He carried the ball 13 times last year against Northwestern. He carried the ball 18 times against Notre Dame. He needed to for them to have a chance to win that football game. He carried 14 times for 130 yards in a duel against Drake May 2 years ago. He went 13 for 96 against Boston College, 14 for 61 in an upset win over Miami, 11 for 64 in a win over Temple, 10 for 54 in a shootout loss to Kansas, 10 for 63 and 2 touchdowns in a bowl win over UCF. Am I going to go in with the game plan being he's going to put up those kind of numbers? No, I'm not. Am I going to go into the game plan saying, hey, look, if you see an opening as a scrambler, scramble. Just when you get what you can get and go down. Am I going to say, hey, look, we're going to have some read zone stuff, and if they crash, we're pulling, and you got to go make some plays? Are we going to have some RPO stuff built in? Are we going to have maybe the occasional short yardage situation? Maybe. There's certainly things I would do where his legs are a part of what you're doing in the first game, but it's there if we need it. It's like here's how I would call it. I'm not running any quarterback power. I'm not running any quarterback counter necessarily early in the game. I know Riley's probably going to want to get hit. I'll call, but what I will do early in the game is I'm going to run RPOs and read zones early in the game. I'm going to empty the backfield and run an RPO with the quarterback draw built in, which is something that Mike Denbrock ran a lot at LSU last year, where if they vacate the box, I got 5-on-5 or 5-on-4. We're pulling that sucker back, letting the defense drop, and I'm going. I would do something like that. I would do an RPO. I wanted them to know right away, you crash that backside end, this quarterback's pulling this sucker and he's getting out the gate. So I would have some of that stuff built in early, but not the between the tackles, power type of football stuff. Let him scramble. I'm not. There's no red flags there. There's no yellow caution, lights there for that. It's just when you get what you can get on those plays and then go down. But you got to let him be him at the end of the day, right? And if he ends up getting 10, 12 carries to beat A&M, if you need him to carry 15 times to beat A&M, then you call that. If you need him to carry the ball 20 times to beat A&M, then you call that. But it's not my game plan going in. It'll be a lot of stuff that comes in the second half or scrambles or things like that, because Notre Dame has the backs to really go at Texas A&M without him. They don't need him to be the dynamic part of the run game that Duke needed him to be. He was their big play weapon at Duke. They don't need him. He's got big play weapons all around him. So you'd be foolish to not take advantage of his running ability. But I don't think that I'm going to have him designing 15 carries for him. Carries, not scrambles, carries for him in the opener against that defensive line. I don't know that that's the greatest thing for him, but I do think there are things that you can do with him that could maybe slow down the A&M defense and keep them from teeing off. Because, like, look, A&M's got some things Notre Dame can go after, but A&M's run defense is going to be really good this season. And they were really good last season. I mean, they had one of the best rush defenses in college football last year. A&M ranked 14th in college football last year in rush defense. And you're bringing in Mike Elko, whose defense, ranked 47th last year in rush defense because he didn't necessarily have the horses that Texas A&M had. And they had a couple games where they kind of got ran on a little bit, but late in the year, that Duke rush defense was pretty good. But I think that that's going to be a tough part to get after them with. But I think that you've got the speed and the different ways to do that. You're just going to have to be creative and use Riley Leonard wisely in those situations. Good question, Iden. Got a super chat down here from R. Goodman. Thank you, R. Who are your surprise breakouts on each side of the ball? Good question. Let's have a little fun with that one. So, surprise breakout. So maybe guys that the national media aren't really thinking a lot about, talking a lot about. I've got a couple guys in mind. And keep in mind that, like, I don't think Billy Schrouth breaking out's a surprise. I don't think Emil Wagner breaking out would be a surprise. Jeremiah Love breaking out wouldn't be a surprise. Jaden Greathouse breaking out wouldn't be a surprise. So the guys that I have in mind is number one, Jadarian Price. Now, I think Jeremiah Love's going to be a dude, but I think they're going to have two dudes in the backfield, and Jadarian and Jeremiah. I don't know that Jadarian is a guy that even a lot of Notre Dame fans are expecting to really have a breakout season, much less national people. So I have Jadarian as being a surprise breakout for me on offense. And then another guy that I think is going to be a surprise breakout player this year is Bo Collins. Now, he's getting talked a lot about, but I think a lot of people look at Bo as just a nice complimentary player, maybe repeat the production he had at Clemson last year, which I think it was like 38 catches for 510 yards, something around there. And he could certainly do that. And if he just repeats what he did at Clemson, I'm happy. Like, that's a good addition. But I could see Bo having an even bigger impact than that. I could see Bo being a 50-plus catch guy this season. I really could see that. I'm not predicting it, but I could see that. And if he does, then I think he ends up being a bit of a surprise breakout player that maybe isn't getting talked about as by as many people, with the exception, of course, of Tommy Guns, because that's all he ever does is talk about Bo Collins. So Bo Collins and Maslin. That's all my man Tommy Guns talks about is Bo Collins and Maslin. So certainly we'll see if that prediction comes true. But he's a guy. Defensively, let me think about that one. Defensively, like I don't know who would be a surprise. So Josh Burnham is a guy that I don't think would be a surprise for this community, for Irish Breakdown people. I think a lot of you guys would be completely on board with with projecting him to be a breakout player. I don't think that would surprise anybody. I could see Drake Bowen being a surprise breakout. The reason I say surprise is because there's a lot of people, including Notre Dame fans, that just assume he's going to get beaten out this season by Kingston. It's just kind of like a matter of when, not if. And I think Drake's going to be a really good football player. And I think when he turns into what I think he's going to turn into, that's going to be a bit of a surprise for people. So that's those would be some of my predictions for breakout players. We do have a super chat down here from Trevor Rocket. Thank you for that, Trevor. And he didn't ask for this in the chat, but I will also ask you guys to really keep Trevor and his now wife, Lindsay, in your prayers. They're definitely going through some times right now, and just lift Lindsay up, her health up to you guys, and be thinking about her and thinking about Trevor, and congratulate him on their recent nuptials. But we're still thinking about you, Trevor, and we're glad that you guys are with us. And I know that you said sometimes Lindsay listens to our show. So Lindsay, if you are, keep fighting. There's a lot of people thinking about you and praying for you on this side. So we got you guys. So I'm glad to thank you for the super chat, Trevor, and glad that you're with us today, my man. Appreciate you. Got another super chat down here from Tyler Evans. Thank you, Tyler. What will you be looking for in the Georgia Tech Florida State game tomorrow? Well, Tyler, I'm not quite sure which direction. I think, Tyler, you just got married recently too, or you at least got engaged, right? So a lot of that going on. I love to hear that. So looking at it just from a game standpoint, just a matchup standpoint, it's kind of similar to what I'm looking for when I think about Notre Dame. Is I want to learn about this football team. What am I looking for? I'm looking to see how good Georgia Tech's offensive line is going to be this year. It was solid last year. Does it get better this year? Lost a couple guys. Does it take a step back? There's some good players coming back though. Does their defense get any better? They've got a different looking defensive staff this year. I believe that a lot of, and I think somebody mentioned this in the chat, but I believe some of Mike Elko's defensive staff from Duke went to Georgia Tech because he didn't actually take a lot of his defensive coaches with him last season. So I believe that there are some coaches that are with him. So let me just pull up the Georgia Tech roster real quick. And of course they don't have, where do they have the coaches? It's some of these rosters, I got to tell you, boy. Okay, so where is the football staff? So we go down here. Okay, well, they got a lot of people. Man, it's crazy how big football staffs are nowadays. So you got Chris Wenke, Buster Faulkner's the offensive coordinators. Yeah, Tyler Santucci, who was the defensive coordinator at Duke last year, is the defensive coordinator now at Duke. He's a good football coach. He was at Notre Dame for a time as well. So he's with them now. So that's good to have him there. But can he get them any better? Because they were not good on defense last year. I mean, Georgia Tech had a really good offense last season, but their defense was not good. They gave up 29.5 points per game last year, gave up 30. They were beating Louisville, gosh, it was like 20-something to 3 early and got rolled in the second half, lost 39-34, lost 48-23 to Ole Miss, lost 38-27 to Bowling Green, 38-23 to BC, 42-21 to Clemson, 31-23 to Georgia. They had beat North Carolina 46-42. So their defense had a lot of problems last year against decent offenses. That's got to get a lot better, especially when you consider how good their schedule is, because you can just outscore them. If you're a good team, you can just outscore them. So for Georgia Tech, does their defense get any better? And then, of course, if it does, that impacts Notre Dame. They got some young receivers. How do they step up? How do they emerge? How do they perform as in regard to that offense having even some older weapons and some better weapons and some deeper weapons? And so that's certainly something that I'm going to keep my eye on and see how that goes. So a lot to think about from that side. And then Florida State, look, I fully expect Florida State's defense to be really good again. So I'll watch that. I want to see how that really good defense matches up against a mobile quarterback and Haynes King. Riley Leonard, I believe, is going to be the most athletic quarterback that Florida State faces this year. Don't remember. I'm looking at their schedule here real quick. I'll pull their schedule up. I don't think that there's anybody else that I think is more dynamic than Riley Leonard on their schedule. They do. They have the kid from BC. He's a pretty good athlete, so that'll be a good test for them. And then, of course, you've got so I don't know that I would say he's a better athlete than Riley Leonard, but he's in the conversation. See here, Duke, Malik Murphy's a solid athlete, not great. Cam Ward's a good athlete, but more of a pocket guy. So really the first 2 weeks for Florida State against obviously Haynes King, and that's someone we'll be looking for this weekend. And then next weekend when they play BC with Thomas Castellanos, is they're going to play two really athletic quarterbacks. Thomas Castellanos had over 1,000 yards rushing last year, the kid from BC, and Haynes King had over 700 yards rushing last season. How do they handle that? What's their plan for a mobile quarterback? Because that's probably something they're going to learn some lessons positively and negatively for when they play Notre Dame. But the real big thing I'm looking forward to from Florida State is, how's their offense going to be? They've got some really good offensive linemen coming back. Maurice Smith at center. You got Darius Washington at tackle. I think they got 3 starting offensive linemen coming back. But the rest of their offense is going to look a lot different. You've got DJ Uiagalelei as a quarterback. We know what he looks like, and we've seen him play before. Notre Dame's faced him twice. But what does he look like at Florida State? How does he fit into that system? They've got some running backs that have played before but never been the guy. Lawrence Toafili's been the closest thing to that. New look wide receivers, guys that were in the rotation last year, but not the guy. How do they handle replacing Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson? Who steps up at tight end now that the kid that transferred in from South Carolina is gone? So those are all things that I want to see, is how quickly can that offense get rolling with so many new faces? Certainly what I'll be looking for in tomorrow's game. And I expect it to be competitive for a while. And, we'll kind of see how that plays out. But I do think that Florida State runs away with it, because the thing for me in this matchup is I think that Georgia Tech can move the ball enough early to maybe stay in the game, but I think they're going to have a hard time moving the ball for 60 minutes against Florida State. Florida State's got a really good defense. And I think once they get caught up to sort of the speed of Georgia Tech's offense, with Haynes King, you got Jamal Haynes at running back. You've got I can't remember that sophomore receiver's name. I always forget that sophomore receiver's name. Really good player. He was a freshman last year. He's a really good player. Once they get caught up to that, I'm very curious to see if they can if they've got any other answers, because you're going to need a lot of answers against Florida State. And so it's going to be a good game. So I don't see it being a game that necessarily goes for 60 minutes, but I hope that it does, because I would love for the first football game of the season we watch to be an entertaining one. So, so that's a good question, Tyler Evans. Appreciate that. Got a couple more super chats down here. One from AST12321. Thank you very much for your super chat. It's 3rd and 6 on your own 40, one timeout, down 4 versus Texas A&M. 1:30 left in the game. What are your calls? Do you have aggression or just focus on change? So if you're at your own 40 and it's 3rd and 6 and there's 1:30 left in the game, at that situation, I'm moving the sticks, because moving the sticks gets us at the midfield. I mean, you're in 4-down territory. The concern is if you take too much of a shot against that pass rush. Let's say you're going to take a deep shot, right? And have some aggression, do some kind of shot down the field. You get sacked, it's pretty much close to ball game at that point in time. You need to focus on the sticks, because the thing about a stick play is, even if you're a yard or two short, you've got 4th down, you're in 2-down territory. What you can't do is lose yards. And then if you take a shot down the field and doesn't hit, now you're in 4th and 6, and that's a tougher situation to be in. You can convert it, but to me, there's just a little bit too much risk at that point in time to be aggressive, unless they're coming up and they present a matchup to you. So, let's say they run cover 1 and you run your slot fade concept. That's a good move the sticks concept, because if they bail under the slot fade, you've got the hitch to option that you can go to. You have a backside dig that you can go to. But if they come up and give you cover 1 or cover 0, you may be able to hit that slot fade or that backside dig for a big play. So, something like that, where I've got, maybe a smash, depending on what coverage they show me, where, I can do the hitch to an option or something backside if I get a one-on-one, like maybe a comeback on the boundary. If they play off, I've got some things that I can check down to move the sticks. But if they come up and play aggressively, then I've got a couple things built in that I could then hit a big play. So my call would be something along those lines. The other thing that I would consider doing is if they're playing off. A lot of teams in those last minute and a half, they want to play off. They want to bail. I may empty the backfield and run an RPO draw. And if they drop 8, then O'Reilly Leonard can tuck that sucker and run. If he doesn't get it, you can line back up and you go for it on 4th down. But I'd feel pretty good about him moving the sticks. And then if they stay in because they're afraid of Riley's running ability, then you've got some leverage opportunities to the boundary to hit some sticks. Maybe a slot fade, maybe a backside, kind of snag concept. You could maybe get a backside pivot with an in cut over top if they play the pivot aggressively. You can run some high-low crossers backside. There's some things you can do that if they bring heat against zero backfield, then you've got some things that you can go to. And so that would probably be some looks that I would have on my play sheet in that situation with one timeout, because I don't want to use my timeout yet. I will if I have to, but I don't want to use my timeout yet. And I'm kind of a fan of in that 3rd and 6 situation, sort of having a 2-play call type of deal where, if we don't get it, we're running. We know what we're running. if we get 4 yards, we know what we're running. We're lining up and we're getting to it before they have time to really get a call in. I'm kind of a fan of those type of situations as well. So that's how I would call it. So good question. Very good question. Riza with a super chat. Thank you very much, Riza. I appreciate that very much. It's been a while since I've seen you in the chat, so it's good to see you back. And of course, we appreciate the super chat. This question is, if an offensive lineman struggles if a tackle, what run concepts do you run to combat the issue, take off pressure? Well, I mean, it depends on what he's struggling with. If his struggles are technical, if his struggles are assignment-based, I mean, you really just kind of got to correct it on the sideline and just say, hey, look, this is what we're going to do. But what you could do as a from a play calling standpoint is, again, keep things as simple as possible. Like for him, like, look, as an offensive coordinator, I can run inside zone 30 times and it's going to look different on how I come at you, because I'm going to go, sometimes I'm going to go split zone where I'm bringing a tight end or a second back to the backside. Sometimes I'm going to run it with a read zone concept where I'm leaving the backside open, or an RPO concept where I'm leaving the backside open. Sometimes I'm going to try to close off the backside and just run inside zone. So I'll put a tight end back there, either in an attached alignment or a wing position, depending on how I want to do it. I may motion a guy so I can get a really nice inside out, angle for that tight end. I may run it out of 12 personnel. I may run it out of pistol. I may run it out of off center. I can do it with jet motion. I can do it with an orbit motion. I can do it with a lot of different things. I can smoke a reverse look to try to keep that guy backside to come at me. So defensively, you have to have a lot of different answers when I'm running inside zone at you. But to my left tackle or right tackle who's struggling, or my guard or whatever, you said it tackle, so it'd be my left tackle or right tackle, it's inside zone. He just has to know whether he's uncovered or covered, and he has to know, am I open to my outside or am I closed to my outside? Those are different things that you look at, but you just try to keep it simple. Now, if he's getting beat physically, then what you may do is you say, hey, look, we're going to have to get the tight end involved with him in the run game. And so that can look one of two ways. One is, if he's really struggling at the point of attack, then you may not want to run a lot of stuff right at him without help. So you put the tight end there, you get your good blocking tight ends there, and that's when you maybe run some stuff with, so he'll get some help. What you can also do is, if he's getting his butt kicked at the point of attack, then I may want to run some stuff away from him. That's not, like some outside zone, some buck sweep, some things like that, where maybe you can use the athleticism of one of the two tackles to kind of just, burrow things out on the backside and not so much of a run right at you. I mean, inside zone backside, if he's getting his butt kicked, you can still get your butt kicked on that. But still, even there, if I'm running inside zone and a guy crashes in front of his face and he can at least just get a body on him, that's fine. We can kind of cut that back a little bit. So there's certainly some things to do. And then, of course, your quarterback runs. I mean, your read zones and different things that you're doing with your quarterback, where, your jet sweeps, where you're running the ball and you don't really need him to do a whole lot. So I think those are different things you can do to try to negate some of the pressure that he has on him. So have the tight end help, keep your run game somewhat simplified from a schematic standpoint, be diverse with how you line up to teams. Like, look, if I'm running a 30 inside zones, I'm going to have 3 or 4 or 5 of them at least, where I'm going to try to do it out of 20 or 21 personnel, spread them out. I got my 2 really talented backs in the game. I almost turn it into a triple, where you can kind of run the inside zone and you can bring that other guy around and you can throw him a little screen or a little swing or something like that, and go old school and just give them a lot to think about. Like, okay, how are you going to play this? And just may not be something you do a bunch down the road, but A&M may not be ready for it. So those are different things that I would look at. But I don't know that Notre Dame necessarily has that in their arsenal. We haven't seen it in practice. I've never seen them run 20 personnel or 21 personnel. But that's just kind of what I would do, and something that I would consider if I was them. So that's where I would be at with that reason. So very, very good question, buddy. Very good question. Robert McReynolds kind of had a follow-up to that. He said, would screens work too? Seems like to slow the rush down, you run screens, and once the rush is slowed down, the tackles can get a foothold. And then he responds to, he said run concepts. But you're actually not misguided there, Robert, because things like that can help as well. So If you're really pinning your ears back and you're coming after my quarterback on the edge, I may hit you with a tunnel screen or a now screen, or do some things, or a slip screen where you think we're chipping on you to try to get you blocked. So my tight end comes and chips, and you're like, I got to fight through, and you power through our tight end chip. And actually, you didn't really beat my tight end. You came screaming like a bat out of hell, and now we're just throwing a little tight end screen behind it. So those things can help slow down a defensive end. And yes, it impacts the pass rush, but there's also some things that you can do in that regard when it comes to, it can slow down the run game a little bit as well. So you're not off there. The screen stuff doesn't 100% slow down the run defense or help a guy running the football, but just overall it can maybe get your defensive edge players thinking a little bit. And then that might be enough to help your offensive linemen be able to have a little bit more success in that type of look. Got a super chat from Iden Banami. Iden says, besides quarterback, who will be the most impactful this season? I mean, that's a long list, buddy. If this is a good football team, it's going to be a lot more than quarterback, man. It's going to be receivers, running backs, tight ends, O-line, D-line. I mean, you're going to have impactful players everywhere. If this is a good football team, you're going to have impact players all over the place. If you don't have a lot of impact players, and this season's not going to go as well as we hope and think it'll go. But, as far as we get ready to start the season, Jeremiah Love's the guy that we're looking at as a potential impact player. You hope that one of the two transfers, either Bo Collins or Chris Mitchell or even Jaden Harrison in some certain looks, are impact guys. You hope that Jaden Greathouse can be an impact guy. You hope that Mitchell Evans can get back to being an impact guy. I do think that Jadarian Price can be an impact guy, in my opinion, as well. Defensively, we know the two interior guys. We know Benjamin Morrison, we know Xavier Watts, but you hope one of the linebackers steps up, at least one, as an impact guy, whether it's Drake Bowen or Jack Kaiser or Kingston or Jalen Sneed or Jaden Allsbury. I don't really care who it is, but you just hope that somebody does. And then the biggest thing for me is they need at least one guy on the edge to step up and be an impact player. That's going to be huge for Notre Dame. And that's a guy that, back to, I think it was your earlier question, man, I really hope that you talk about surprise breakouts. I think Boubacar Traore could be a bit of a surprise breakout nationally. Him and Josh Burnham are both guys that I have my eye on as potential breakout players. And there's one other player that I was told could maybe be on the verge of a breakout, but I'm gonna wait till that first game or two is played and then see if that's just smoke and mirrors or if it's legit. So we'll see. And I'll remind you guys who that is, or I'll try to remind you guys who that is. I'm actually going to check something here real quick. So Notre Dame did not update their roster as of last week. It had not been updated since the summer. I'm actually going to go look now. Yeah, it is still the same. They have not updated their roster since the summer. So they did not do a camp kickoff roster update. So all those heights and weights are older. Not too older, but like beginning of the summer, I believe, is when a lot of those were taken. So I know that discussion was being had in the chat. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page. Same page for that one. All right. We got another one from Iden. It says, what is the best part of A&M's team? D-line? If so, how much better is ours? Well, I think their D-line is definitely the best part of their team. Is Notre Dame's better? I don't know that Notre Dame's is better. I think they're kind of similar. Notre Dame is definitely better up the middle. Even if Shamar Turner plays inside, I think Notre Dame is definitely better up the middle. Not just your two starters, but Notre Dame has very good depth. Now, A&M's depth improved this offseason as well. They have a couple guys returning, but Rodis Johnson transferred in from Wisconsin. He's a good football player, gives them good depth. He's kind of like their Gabriel Rubio type of guy. So they're good up the middle. Notre Dame is better. They're better on the edge by a lot right now. Now, Notre Dame can close the gap depending on, RJ Oben coming helped a ton. If Jordan Pataho gets back to being what what we think he can be on a more consistent basis of Boubacar and Burnham and Bryce Young and guys like that step up and perform well, Notre Dame can certainly close that gap. But I like this A&M defensive line a lot, especially the edge players. And I'm very curious where they're going to play Shamar Turner. I've seen people talk about him playing end. I've seen people talk about him playing 3 technique. I'm very curious to see, and I think he'll play both within a game, but where does he spend most of his time in this game? I'm very curious to see how that plays out. Not just in this game, but the rest of the game. But their D-line is excellent. I don't know that I would say Notre Dame's D-line is better. It's potentially a wash. I think you could, if you wanted to give A&M the edge in that, I would not argue with you. If you wanted to give Notre Dame the edge in that, I would not argue with you. I think they do certain things very well. The one thing is for sure, A&M's defensive line is better pass rushers overall. They have better pass rushers than what we know that Notre Dame has. And hopefully guys like Burnham and Boubacar can help fix that. And Oben can help fix that. Aiden Benami is hiring like someone like Anthony Tresh. What you are speaking about with adding staff members, I saw you weren't too pleased with the hire, but more so talent and depth to the staff. I wasn't thrilled with that. What I was told about the hire made me feel a little bit better about it. I'm not going to share that publicly. I put that on the message board, but I like what they're trying to do. They're trying to look at it from an analytical standpoint and an analytics standpoint, and not from a standpoint of necessarily. I mean, there's always going to be some level of analytics to play calling. That's always been true. We just didn't call it analytics back then. We called it tendencies and things like that. But it all came from, you break down the film, you type in the data, and what does the data kick you? On 3rd and 5 to 7, they run this blitz X amount of times against this look. So if we don't want them to run that blitz, then we line up in this look. If we want them to run that blitz, then we line up in this look and we call this particular play. That's been going on forever. It's also what my understanding is, it's going to be a lot about opponent scouting, but also looking at it from a standpoint of like evaluating portal kids and high school kids as well. So I'm all about going down that road. It's one of the ways to add a staff, but with the new rules that analysts can be on the field, you need to also be investing a lot more money in what you're paying analysts and going out and get some really good analysts now that they can be on the field. Because the analyst job just got a lot more attractive to certain coaches because they can now be on the field. So that'll be very interesting to kind of see how that goes. And then, of course, continue to expand the recruiting staff, continue to expand other aspects of the program, mental health, nutrition, weight rooms, wouldn't be opposed to adding more staff there. It's all encompassing, honestly, Iden. It's all of it. All of it's got to be addressed. Another from Iden, how big of a gap is there between Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey? RIP to Mama Mickey. Well, they're very different players. It really just depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for a guy that's just going to come out and cover all day and line up and play a lot of cover one, then you're going to want to go with Christian Gray. He's a very talented cover player. If you're looking for a guy that's going to play more off man and drive downhill and make big plays and all that type of stuff, then Jaden Mickey's more your guy. They're very different players, and just depends on what you're looking for and how much you are going to split up, because they're both going to play, right? But how much you're going to split up those reps is going to go a long way towards determining what you're doing in a particular game. If there's a particular game where your field cornerback's going to have to be coming downhill a ton because this team throws a ton of perimeter screens and a ton of quick perimeter throws, and they've got a lot of run game that they like to go to the field on the perimeter, then the Jaden's needs to play more because he's really physical and really strong and can come down and thrive in that situation. If you're playing a team that wants to drop back and throw the ball all day, that's a game that you're going to see more of Christian because he's really good at, covering in that type of situation. So it just depends on, how big of a gap, what are you asking about? Because if you're just asking overall, just talent, then there's a relatively significant gap in just God-given ability between the two. Christian's taller, he's longer, he's faster, he's more athletic. Jaden's stronger and thicker. But it's not quite that simple. It's, well, what's the gap in? Okay, pure coverage ability. Well, I think Christian Grace is a significantly better cover player than Jaden Mickey. If I got to come out and play an option team, I like Jaden Mickey, or not an option team, but a heavy running team, because option team, I worry about Jaden getting, kind of biting down on a play action pass and getting beat over top. But a heavy running team, a team that throws a ton of perimeter screens, I like having Jaden Mickey out there because he's really good at that. So it just depends on what you're looking to get out of that, to be honest with you, Iden. Next one from Iden. He says, when it comes to communication with Deuce Knight, do you confront it head first when the BS started and discuss the issues, or act normal and ignore the smoke? No, you don't ignore it. You don't ignore it. No, this stuff doesn't come from anywhere. You got to be smart and savvy how you do it. But I can assure you guys, Notre Dame has never been caught with their pants down in this situation. They've always been very well aware of what's going on. They've had honest conversations with him. The reality is you can't force someone to give you I believe that Notre Dame has always been honest with Deuce Knight.Ey've been very well aware of what's going on. They have talked to him about what's going on, and I'll just leave it at that. But they have known for a while where things stand, and I'll just leave it at that for now. And when he does whatever he's going to do, we'll talk about it further on the board. But I really don't care to spend a lot of time on this show talking about Deuce Knight. I mean, he's committed to Notre Dame right now. I don't anticipate that lasting long. And honestly, I'm so over the whole situation, and honestly kind of over recruiting to a degree, because it is a shady business, got way shadier. And it just kind of takes some of the fun out of covering it, and, takes some of the, it just does. So I'm kind of over talking about Deuce for now. We'll just sit back and let him make his decision, make his announcement, and then we'll go from there. Okay. Ant VR with a question: from greatest to least, how confident are you that Notre Dame will land each of the recent wide receiver offerees? It's a little too early for that, honestly, Ant VR. I mean, I don't believe any of those kids have visited Notre Dame. For those who may not know what he's talking about, yesterday Notre Dame offered two receivers and one athlete that they're looking at as a receiver. Number one is they offered Jace Brown. He's a kid committed to UCLA from California. He plays at he's at Downey High School, or he's at Warren High School in Downey, California. They also offered Jalen Cooper, who's at Steele High School in Texas, Cibolo, Texas, and then they offered Antavius Richardson, who is a high school quarterback and DB who they're recruiting to play receiver. So very early. I do believe that all of those kids have expressed interest in Notre Dame. That's why offers are coming. Look, I've known about Jace Brown and Jalen Cooper for well over a month. Those are not new guys on the radar. Antavius Richardson is much newer to the list, so I'm less optimistic about where things stand with him, to be honest with you. But there's definitely interest in these two kids. And the reason I mentioned that I've known this for over a month is because Notre Dame's been on these kids for a while. They're not going to offer those two kids right now if there's not some expressed interest on their part in Notre Dame. I don't know this for a fact. This is my read of the situation and just using common sense and saying, I think these coaches are good recruiters and smart coaches. So I don't think they're going to do something that's going to make them look bad. I would hope not. I'd be shocked if they would have offered those kids if there hadn't already been conversations about potential visits. And so, again, that's my opinion. That's my read. But I don't know that I have a strong read on where they are to land them. I want to see how the visits go. There's a lot of things that the visits matter. I mean, you got to size these kid up. Kid and say, I'm 6'2", 195. You get him on campus and he's 6 foot, $182. That might change some things a little bit, right? And you get a kid on campus, and look, this happened with a kid that we all thought Notre Dame was going to get this year. He visits campus, and things didn't necessarily go well, and that created some red flags that caused Notre Dame to eventually move on. So I could sit here and tell you, they're going to get this kid, but really until those visits happen, it's hard to know kind of where they truly stand. I do know this, and I'll just tell you this. There's obviously interest on Notre Dame's side. That's why these kids got offered. But from what I've been told, there's legitimate interest on the side of each three of those kids in Notre Dame. Now the next step is let's see them get on campus and see how things go. So that's where I would be at that. Jace Brown, just my evaluation. Jace Brown's a good physical kid. It doesn't blow me away. He's not a burner. His production is just kind of okay, but he's smart. He's physical. He's got good hands. He knows how to get open. He's kind of a boundary guy to me. Solid, good prospect. I really like Jalen Cooper a lot. He's tall. He's skinny. He reminds me of a taller version of KK Smith. Super productive. Had over 1,500 yards last year and I think 23 touchdowns at a really good level. I think 6A in Texas. His initial burst isn't great, but he's got really good long speed. So he doesn't look like he's going fast, and his gear kind of kicks in and he really can run. Good route runner, as is Jace Brown. Strong for his size, but he's obviously going to have to get a lot stronger. He's like a $165 at 6'1". So they're going to need him to really take a step in that regard and become an even more stronger player, but he's got time to do that. But he's a kid that reminds me a lot of KK Smith in that I said at the time that I think KK's the kind of kid that when he gets to college and physically matures and gets in a weight room, his speed's going to take off, and that happened. And this kid reminds me a lot of that as well. And Tavius Richardson, it's really hard to evaluate him. I've only watched this film a little bit, and I believe the film was sped up. I have to go back and watch it again. But what I can tell is that he's very elusive, very quick, really good vision. He ran for over 800 yards as a quarterback last year and averaged over 10 yards a carry. Had a couple long kick returns for scores. Plays defense. He's a pretty strong kid despite not being overly filled out. He's at least 6'1", if not 6'2", and it seems to have some speed. I believe his track numbers. I don't know if I can't remember what I think a 10.68 is. Yeah, 10.68 is his 100-meter time, and he ran a 21.43 in the 200-meter dash. Those are both really good times. So even though the film looks a little sped up, he's still way faster than everybody on the film, and his track numbers back up a guy that's got some speed. He was originally committed to Georgia State. Then bigger schools started coming after him. He flipped to South Florida. And in recent weeks, like North Carolina offered him, Duke offered him, Mississippi State offered him, Memphis has offered him. So his recruitment's starting to pick up a little bit. So he's a kid that's got some skills. So if I were to just kind of rank him right now off how I like him, and this is not my scientific ranking. I haven't typed in the numbers. I haven't gone through the grading process. None of those type of things. But just sort of my gut feel, where I'm looking at it this way, it's Jalen Cooper would be at the top of my list. Artavius Richardson would be number 2, and Jace Brown would be number 3. That's how I would rank them all. But they're all solid players, and they all bring value, and they're different type of players. So we'll kind of see. We'll kind of see how that plays out. But very good football players. Very good football players. Got some more super chats here I want to get to. Thank you, Ant VR, for that question down here from Iden Banami. Actually, we already answered that one real quick. Michael S. with a super chat. Thank you, Michael. Since Jagasol was hurt and replaced by most likely Knapp, has O-line effectiveness against A&M been diminished to the point that Notre Dame's chances have been substantially reduced? No, they haven't. Look, are they going to be as good on the O-line now as they were with Charles Jagasol? I don't think so, especially in the opener. But this is way too extreme. Way too extreme. Charles Jagasol was going to have his own issues with Texas A&M. Anthony Knapp is not some bum kid you're throwing out there who can't play football. I mean, I think we have taken this injury and we have turned it into something that it shouldn't be, which is this oh my God, I don't know how Notre Dame's going to win this game now. There's some comments that were made. Actually, I'm going to pull that comment up now because I can't believe Andrew Gilmore is the voice of reason. I'm busting your chops a little bit, Andrew, but Andrew Gilmore said this. He goes, I have a ton of respect for Elko. I do too, but I think some people are building A&M too much. They have a potentially dangerous pass rush, but our D is very good and battle tested. They should carry us to a win. This isn't 2022 Ohio State in the horseshoe. They are a fringe top 20 team. No pushover for sure, but a team with Cross, Mills, Morris, and Watt shouldn't give up too much to A&M's offense. And that's one of the most rational takes I've seen from a fan. It really is. Look, they're a good football team. Can they beat Notre Dame? Of course they can beat Notre Dame. They were a 7-6 team last year. And while I expect them to turn things around and be better than 7-6, they underachieved. They're not some team that should go out there and in the opener just handle some top 10 team. I don't care who Notre Dame is playing at left tackle. If it's a scholarship football player at the University of Notre Dame for an offensive line, He should be able to handle himself to some degree. And, I don't see it that way. And this is kind of where it's Brandon Hallinan says this. He says, describe feeling going to A&M by comparing it to a pregame of past marquee away games. Expect to lose like Georgia in 2019, puncher's chance like Ohio State in 2022, expect to win like Miami 2017. I mean, first of all, I didn't expect Notre Dame to lose to Georgia in 2019. I thought Notre Dame would win a close game, and they almost did. They had the ball inside the 50 with 2 minutes left. If you score a touchdown, you win the game. Like, Notre Dame fans were way too pessimistic about that game. They were way too pessimistic about Ohio State the last 2 years, and they were maybe overly kind of excited about Miami in 2017, but that was an anomaly game. Like, this Notre Dame football team should not be expected to lose to anybody. Like, as far as what I mean expected to lose, it's not can they lose. Of course Georgia could beat Notre Dame this year. Of course Bama could beat Notre Dame this year. Of course Ohio State could beat Notre Dame this year. Of course Texas A&M could beat Notre Dame this year. But to expect them to lose, to me, is a really disrespectful evaluation of that football team. And I think in the Kelly era, we saw this. We saw the coaching staff, we saw Brian Kelly, I should say, tamp down expectations constantly. So if they went and lost a road game to A&M that they shouldn't have lost, they should not have lost that game. They did things in that game where they you let them win that game. And, of course, Jake Fromm made some big plays as well. But you shouldn't have expected to lose that game. But Kelly liked to have that be the feeling, because then if they played tough like they did, then it's almost like a moral victory. What the freaking heck kind of coach in year 10 is looking for moral victories in year 10? Fortunately, Marcus Freeman and his staff don't view it that way. The only moral victories they have are actual victories that maybe they were sloppy. Hey, it was sloppy. We didn't do this, we do that, but hey, we won the game, so we're gonna roll with that. But I don't get into this whole expect to lose thing, so I can't even look at it like that. I mean, this is a game. Notre Dame is the number 7 team in the country. A&M is a borderline top 25 team. Notre Dame should be expected to win this game. Flat out. They should be if any top 10 team not named Notre Dame was heading to College Station, I'd be shocked if that team wasn't favored to win. Now, I understand why Notre Dame hasn't won some of these games, but I keep telling people, yes, they have. You guys keep talking about Georgia and Ohio State. This is not who Texas A&M is. Texas A&M is closer to NC State, who Notre Dame beat by 3 touchdowns last year, who's a preseason top 25 team, very close to Texas A&M, spent half of last year ranked in the top 25, and I believe climbed up all the way as high as number 13 at one point in time. Notre Dame beat them by 3 touchdowns at their place. They're closer to 2022 North Carolina, who won 9 games, played in the ACC title game, almost beat Oregon in a bowl game, than they are to Ohio State or Georgia. They just are. That's not disrespectful to Texas A&M, because this is not going to last long. Them being a borderline top 25 team is not going to last long with Mike Elko in charge. I think they're going to be a perennial top 15 team that occasionally has that really veteran team that you're like, that team could make a deep run this year. And I love what Mike Elko is doing, but no Notre Dame fans should not expect Notre Dame to lose this game. They should expect Notre Dame to win this game. We need to get past the Kelly nonsense of tamp down expectations. If they don't win this game, that's a disappointment. I don't care how hard they play. That's a disappointment. I'll praise how hard they play. I'll say, look, there's some things to learn from and get better. You guys know how I handle losses, but it'll not be acceptable. You should not lose to this football team. I don't care where the game is being played. I don't care what the temperature is. You're in year 3. You have a top 10 football team coming back. You have the more experienced football team in a lot of places. And yes, they have a great D-line. So do you. So no, Notre Dame fans should expect Notre Dame to win this game. And if they don't, then we can deal with the consequences and talk about what Notre Dame needs to do to finally get to that point where they win it. But Notre Dame fans need to get out of this mindset of, preparing for the worst and hope for the best. This is Notre Dame, guys. We're Notre Dame fans. We should not have that mindset, especially when the team has the talent that this team has. And we're talking about a team that over the last 2 years went 12-13. Think about that. Why would we look at a team that went 12-13 the last 2 years as a team that maybe we should expect Notre Dame to lose to. That would say way more about Notre Dame than it does Texas A&M. And that's definitely not where we should be and what Notre Dame fans should be thinking. They just definitely not where they should be. I'll ask you this question too, because somebody just said something, media overhyping the Aggies. Let me go to the preseason top 25. Just give me a second. So we're going to look at the top 25, and let's look at preseason rankings. Okay. Right now, Texas A&M is ranked 20th. The number 21 team in the country is Arizona, both polls. Number 22 is NC State. In the coaches poll, number 22 is Kansas in the AP top 25. Do any of y'all think that if Notre Dame's season opener was at Kansas, at Arizona, or at NC State, that anyone would be talking about Notre Dame might be losing this game? No, because they're not SEC teams. I mean, that's basically where it is. And it says, well, the spread, it reacted the way that it did is because A&M people are throwing heavy money on their team to win, so they're trying to balance things back out. That's how that works. So I just, could they lose? Of course they can lose. I'm not going to sit there and say there's no way Notre Dame loses A&M. That would be disrespectful of Texas A&M's roster, and that would be disrespectful of Mike Elko, and I'm not going to do that. But Mike Elko in game one at A&M should not have a better team on the field. I don't care if they play on Mars. Should not have a better team on the field than Marcus Freeman does in season 3. And I'm very curious how this game is going to play out because we're going to have a lot to talk about after that game, for sure. One way or the other, we're going to have a lot to talk about after that game. All right, Ant VR, what's the biggest thing Indy detractors in the national media are missing about Notre Dame this season from your perspective? How athletic this team is. That's always the thing about Notre Dame. Oh, they're not fast enough. They're not this. They're not dynamic. They're really good in the lines. And I think that's honestly why some are having the overreaction to losing Jagasol. Now, look, Jagasol's a loss. And I don't think there's any scenario where the offensive line is going to play as well this year as it would have if Jagasol was healthy. I just don't. I think he's their most physically gifted player. But because Notre Dame has always been so reliant on offensive line play, and I hope that they still remain that way, although there's some troubling developments. 2 of the last 3 years, the O-line hasn't been that good to some varying degree. But when Notre Dame's not really good there's this assumption that, okay, they're going to struggle. And in a lot of years in the past, that was very valid, Ant VR. I think we would all agree on that. And in past years, if the O-line was not going to be good, then this Notre Dame football team is going to struggle to beat Toledo and struggle to beat Florida State, who's not very good. They're going to struggle to beat Virginia Tech. They're going to struggle to beat, and when they play Cincinnati on the road, they're just going to get their, kind of smacked a little bit because, they're not good enough up front to really win on the perimeter. And that was true then. It's not true now. I mean, Notre Dame has legit All-American secondary players. They have legit athleticism. They have the legit NFL talent in the secondary. They have legit NFL talent at wide receiver. They have legit NFL talent at running back. They have one of the best tight ends in the country. They have a very dynamic player at quarterback. I mean, guys, let's be real about something. If Riley Leonard would have transferred to Alabama this offseason, let's say Jalen Milroe goes in the portal and he goes somewhere where he can do whatever, goes to Miami or something like that instead of Cam Ward. And Riley Leonard would have gone home back to Alabama. And the reason I bring up Alabama is because it's an SEC school and he's from Alabama. Let's say that, well, here's a better example. Let's say Riley Leonard would have transferred to Ohio State, because I'm seeing all this hype about Will Howard being a top 5 Heisman candidate and all this other kind of stuff. There's nothing about Will Howard that should make anyone think he's a Heisman candidate other than the fact he's at Ohio State. Nothing. I mean, he's a solid football player. But Kansas State was ready to move on to Avery Johnson. That's why Will Howard's not their quarterback anymore. I mean, Will Howard last year, as a senior, passed for 2,643 yards, only completed 61.3% of his passes, threw for 24 touchdowns and 10 interceptions, and as a runner, ran for 351 yards and 9 touchdowns in 12 games. And I'm seeing him constantly getting ranked ahead of Riley Leonard in a Heisman voting. The last time Riley Leonard was healthy, as a true sophomore, he completed 63.8% of his passes, threw for 2,967 yards, 20 touchdowns, 6 picks, and rushed for 699 yards and 13 touchdowns. Riley Leonard averaged 5.6 yards per rush, 7.6 yards per attempt passing. Will Howard averaged 7.4 yards per attempt and 4.3 yards rushing. So I ask again, where does this come from? It comes from the fact that he's at Ohio State and the expectation of what Ohio State is on offense relative to what Notre Dame is. Now, that's a justified thing that they've earned based on the past. But the past isn't the present. You can't keep punishing Mike Denbrock for sins of coaches that weren't named Mike Denbrock. You can't punish Riley Leonard because of play from quarterbacks not named Riley Leonard, right? These guys are individual players. You have to evaluate them on who they are. And so I look at it and if Riley Leonard would have gone somewhere else, he'd be getting way more hype right now than Notre Dame. And I think a lot of that just comes down to not Notre Dame bias, like, oh, they hate Notre Dame. It's not that per se. I mean, that's always true for some people, but I just think overall it comes down to, I don't think a lot of people understand and appreciate the overall athleticism and talent that Notre Dame has on offense. I don't think enough people are talking about Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. Athlon Sports, love Athlon Sports. I work with Athlon Sports, and I got respect for what they do. But they had a top 20 running back ranking that didn't have Notre Dame in it. That's just flat out wrong. Even just based off last year's production, that's wrong. And high school rankings, that's wrong. But if, you look at Alabama's in the top 20 and they don't have a whole lot more production coming back than Notre Dame does at running back, if they have more at all. And I keep hearing about how, Justice Haynes is going to be this great runner at Alabama this year. And I think that he will be. I love Justice Haynes. He ran for 168 yards last year and 2 touchdowns. Why is there an assumption that he's going to be a stud, but we're not seeing the same assumption that Jeremiah Love, a consensus top 100 recruit, or Jadarian Price are going to be? It's because Alabama gets treated differently than Notre Dame. They've earned it to a certain degree. But that's why I say, to your question, I don't think people appreciate and understand how athletic and talented Notre Dame is. Look, some Ohio State fans are going to tell you, oh, Notre Dame sucks, but you talk to a lot of rational Ohio State fans, they're going to tell you that's one of the things they were most surprised by with Notre Dame last year, is that they could compete with Ohio State athletically. That was we didn't think Benjamin Morrison was that dude, and then all of a sudden he locks down our dudes again for 2 years. We couldn't get the pass game going, and we're better than you and all that, but that's fine. But real Ohio State fans will look at it this way. No, Riley Leonard did not visit Ohio State. Ohio State and Auburn tried to get Riley Leonard to visit, but he did not visit. So I think that's kind of where it comes from. I just think Notre Dame has a lot more impact talent at the skill positions than what people have given them credit for. And it continues to be the case. It's like Georgia in 2019, and talking to a lot of their fans, we're surprised at how talented Notre Dame was. Well, yeah, they were always that talented. I kept trying to tell you guys that they were that talented. And this is another opportunity for Notre Dame to show that. And just beating A&M won't settle that. They're going to have to beat A&M where they're clearly the better team, whether it's by 10 or 13 points. I don't know that they're going to do that, but that's the only way that it's really going to change that narrative, is you got to start winning some of these games, right? Like beating in the mess out of NC State's not changing that narrative. Beating the mess out of North Carolina, no matter how athletic that North Carolina team is changing that narrative. You got to start winning games like this, even though A&M is kind of on those teams' level. The perception-wise, it's going to be that way. And so you've got to win that game. You've got to beat Florida State. You've got to go into the playoff and beat some powerhouse, because you're not going to earn that respect until you start beating those teams. That's just the reality. So I can say it's unfair, it's not correct, it's not accurate, but it's also understandable why it's that way. Yeah, this is a great comment down here from Carrie Later or Kirill Ader. I'm not sure which one that is. It says Notre Dame is irrelevant, but when you beat them, you won the Super Bowl. Amen. This is what we always hear, right? Like, Notre Dame is everyone's Super Bowl. Well, but it's also a team that's irrelevant. You know what I mean? Oh, Notre Dame doesn't matter. Nobody in the SEC cares about Notre Dame. Go look at the crowds and the prices of tickets every time Notre Dame goes and plays an SEC team on the road. They're insane. It's kind of crazy for an irrelevant football team that people are paying $5,000 for a ticket for this game. A buddy of mine was trying to go. He was going to get like 50-yard line tickets in like the upper deck, and they were like a couple grand. It's interesting that an irrelevant football team is going to, generate ticket prices that much, but that's an absolute great way of looking at it. Carrie is fine. So that's a great observation, Carrie. Great observation. Back on track here. It's also a good question by Ant VR. Really good stuff. Feel free to skip if you're going out to put out predictions, but do you think Notre Dame can overcome the inexperience on the O-line to defeat Texas A&M? Look, I don't mind answering this because I'm not giving a score prediction because I haven't made one yet, but I've said multiple times this week that I do expect Notre Dame to win this football game. And I don't know what my score prediction is going to be, but I will absolutely predict Notre Dame to win that game. I just, I'm going to break down some more film and just really kind of hammer down on matchups and try to come to a score that I think will happen and be more realistic. But I do expect Notre Dame to win this football game. Muhammad Abdi, Brian, if Notre Dame makes the playoff, will you rather Notre Dame host the third best SEC team or go on the road as a lower seed and play the third best Big Ten team? In that scenario, I'd want to host. I mean, I don't care who you play. I'd want to host. I think that's going to be good for Notre Dame. Third best Big Ten team is going to be real good. Third best SEC team is going to be really good. And if I had to play one of those two really good teams, then I'd rather get them at home. So let's just say, like, based on my predictions, my number 3 SEC team right now is going to be Georgia. Now, I think Georgia's the most talented SEC team, but I'm just looking at the standings, right? Because their schedule's so hard. I predicted to have Bama and A&M in the SEC title game, and then Georgia's the next team in the SEC to make it. So if Notre Dame hosts the third best SEC team, that's going to be Georgia. If Notre Dame goes on the road and plays the third best Big Ten team, that's most likely going to be Penn State. Neither of those games are easy. I'd rather get the game at home. So that's where I would rather be. And then, of course, in that particular instance, if it's not Georgia, it'll be Bama or Texas. And the same thing applies. I'd rather get one of those teams at home. And the third best SEC team is going to be a legitimate title contender. I'd like to knock one of those teams out at home in the first round if you can. That'd be ideal because you may play the third best Big Ten team on the road in round 1, and then you get stuck playing the third best SEC team in the next round on a neutral field. I'd rather play Georgia, Texas, or Bama at home, and then play Penn State on a neutral field. Because here's why. Let's just say you play that. You're going to go play a Big Ten team in round 2, and then let's say you got to play Penn State in the semifinals, right? You're going to play Penn State somewhere south or out west where you all got to travel. If you get caught with the third best SEC team in the semifinals, right? Because you can't play those teams in the quarters. The quarters is going to be one of the conference winners. But let's say you got to then play that third best team because it's not a given. You won't have to play that third best team in the semifinal, especially if it's an SEC team. So if you play Penn State at home and knock them out, or on the road and knock them out, you still might have to play Georgia, Bama, or Texas, the number 3 SEC team in the semifinals. That's going to be on a neutral field. Where's that neutral field going to be? It's going to either be in California, Texas, or down south. Matter of fact, let me look at this year's college football playoff schedule and see which game, because they rotate the New Year's 6 games. And let me just go find where are the semifinals this year. The semifinals this year are going to be played in Miami or Dallas. So you're going to go play Georgia and Miami, Alabama and Miami, or Texas and Dallas, or Alabama and Dallas. I would much rather knock that team off in the first round. And if you're not good enough to beat them at home, then you're not good enough to be a champion anyway. And then maybe I get Penn State, the third best Big Ten team, on a neutral field in Dallas or Miami. That to me would be the better pathway for me. You're going to have to beat one of those teams anyway. I'd rather just go that way and get it done. Get it done at home in the first round. That's what I'd rather do. Got another one from Muhammad Abdi. Brian, what do you think were the strengths and weaknesses of past Notre Dame coaches of your lifetime, and what's one key area Coach Freeman has to improve on in year 3? So I talked a lot about that last part yesterday, Muhammad, and I would encourage you to watch that show. And it really comes down to learning from mistakes and getting Notre Dame to play on more of a raising the bar of what the level is for Notre Dame. And Pat, in his 2 years, the highs have been really high and the lows have been pretty low. And what I want to see Coach Freeman learn to do is to have the baseline be more here, still have those highs, but keep the quote unquote lows are more up here. And that's really a big thing for him. But when you look at like my lifetime, it really starts with Lou Holtz. Strengths of Lou Holtz. His teams were always physical. His teams were always well coached. His teams were always ready in big games. He had a great record against top 5 teams in bowl games and things like that. I mean, he had a great record in those instances. The problem for Coach Holtz, there was two weaknesses. Number one is he didn't quite adapt his offense the way he should have. He should have adapted his offense. When you sign Ron Paulus, you should have changed your offense more than he did. And he didn't. And then the other weakness of Coach Holtz, in my opinion, was they weren't always up for the teams that they were supposed to beat. And when you look at some of those teams that didn't quite, they weren't quite as good as what they should have been. So, like, here's an example. You look at the 1990 team. And that team beat number 4 Michigan. They beat number 24 Michigan State on the road. They beat number 2 Miami that season. In a game that was just like a really good game. And by the way, that number 24 Michigan State team that they beat on the road finished the season ranked 16th. That was a very good Michigan State team. That team also beat Pittsburgh that year on the road. They beat Tennessee at Tennessee that year. They beat number 18 USC on the road that season. Tennessee finished that year ranked 8th, and Notre Dame beat them. USC finished that year ranked 20th, and Notre Dame beat them, both of them on the road. Think about that. They beat 3 top 20 teams on the road: Michigan State, Tennessee, and USC when you look at end-of-season rankings. Then they beat number 7 Michigan at home. They beat number 2 Miami, who finished the year ranked 3rd at home. But then they lost to an unranked Stanford team at home. Stanford finished that year 5-6. Notre Dame lost to them at home. And then they lost to a good Penn State team on the road. At home. Shouldn't have lost to Penn State in 1990. Not at home. Like, you don't have at Tennessee you win, at USC you win, and then you lose at home to Penn State. It was games like that. You go to 1991, same type of situation. Where you have some really big wins and you blow some teams out, but then you get blown out at Penn State, you get beat at home by Tennessee, you blow a big lead at home to Tennessee, you just team that you just should have won. And again, 1992, same thing. You tied Michigan, which I didn't love. They blew out a ranked BC team. They got payback against Penn State. They beat a ranked USC team on the road, and just went and beat number 4 Texas A&M 28-3 in a bowl game, but then they lost at home to Stanford by 17. 1993 might be the greatest example. I mean, you come out in 1993, you beat number 3 Michigan on the road, you beat number 1 Florida State at home, and then the next week you lose at home to number 17 Boston College. It was games like that were just so maddening during Coach Holtz's era. It just was like, man, like, how do you lose that game? And it can get frustrating. It can get very, very frustrating. And I've heard some stories about that Stanford game. I think, like, Rocket got hurt, knocked out, and they had some fumble. People in the chat talking about fumble. Loose emojis told me about that game before, but it's just, you're Notre Dame at that point in time. You shouldn't be losing those kind of games, and that was some of my frustrations with Coach Holtz it just was those kind of losses. He should have had more than one title. He's a legend. I love Coach Holtz, and I think he would tell you that. They should have had more than one title. Now, Notre Dame fans will tell you, or Notre Dame players will tell you, well, yeah, they should have had more than one title because they should have been the champs in 93, and I think it's a very valid argument. But here's the thing. You shouldn't have left it to the voters. If you'd have beat Boston College at home, it doesn't matter. You're going to be the champ. There's no doubt. You're going to be the champ. And so those are things that you look at and just you get a little frustrated by, like, man, how did that happen? Like, if Notre Dame beat Stanford at home in 1992, like, what happens to that team? They were ranked, I think, 6th at the time. What happens? That'd have been very interesting to see how that season would have played out at that point in time. So, they were ranked 5th in the polls going into the bowl game with a loss to Stanford. Would they have had a shot to win it all in 92? It's a good question. It's a very good question. And we'll never know because they didn't. They didn't get it done. All right. Coach Bent has a two-parter. Coach Bent 574. Number one, based on board posts this week, join the board, which combined roster and staff from the big week one games, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, USC, LSU, Clemson, Georgia, would you rather have for the rest of the year? Which combined roster and staff from the week one big games would I rather have the rest of the year? I mean, it's Notre Dame's. I'm not going to wish to have somebody else's roster. Let's take Notre Dame's out of the equation. Which roster and coaching staff would I rather have the rest of the year? Combined roster and staff. It's Georgia. I mean, Georgia's not a perfect roster. They've got holes that they've got to fix and fill, but they're not a perfect team roster by any stretch, but that's a very talented roster. You know, probably the most talented roster in college football. I think it's a little bit more debatable than some people make it, but it's a very talented roster. I think they've got a better roster than Clemson. They certainly have a better roster than LSU and USC and Texas A&M. So of those teams not named Notre Dame, I would go with Georgia. And then part two, does it change your answer if you have to play the harder schedule of the pair that you choose? Are there any games whose combined roster you would think about? I'm not someone who likes to duck from competition. So I think especially in a 12-team playoff, because if Georgia goes 10-2 and they don't win the SEC, they're still in the playoff. And they're still going to be a team to be reckoned with. And they'll be so much more battle-tested and ready to make a run. I mean, think about it. By the time Georgia gets to the postseason, there's nobody they're going to face in the postseason is going to be better than teams that they faced in the regular season. Because some of the teams they play in the postseason might be the teams that they lost to in the regular season. I mean, incredibly battle tested. And I think that's something that team could use. I think that's going to be I think Georgia, one thing that hurt them against Bama last year is they hadn't been challenged all year. They would toy with people last year. I mean, they'd win games. And you're just like, they're not even playing hard. They're not even locked in. Like, they're just way better than that team. Then they played Bama and got punched in the mouth a little bit and didn't quite know how to handle it. They're going to know how to handle that this year, and they're going to be far more battle tested. So their record may not be as good as it was last year in the regular season, but they're going to be a way better team, in my opinion, come playoff time because they're going to get tested. And they're going to have to, learn to overcome some adversity. And they may win every game, but they're going to have to earn a lot of those wins. They're not just going to roll the ball out and go 12-0 this year like they did last year. Much different team. Aiden Regan, what's your favorite, most memorable play in recent history? Mine is Deshaun Kaiser to Will Fuller for the game-winning touchdown versus Virginia. This is a good one. Let me think about that. I mean, that play is in the conversation. So we're going back to 2010. Boy, that's just some of the plays that kind of off the top of my head I think about from that era. I think of Everett hitting Chris Brown on a post route against Oklahoma. I think of the goal line stop in overtime against Stanford. That was a great feeling, to watch that happen and just know that you beat a team that just kind of owned you the 3 previous years. That was a big moment. Thinking to future seasons for about 15 seconds, the touchdown pass to, I think it was Corey Robinson was a big one against Florida State for about 15 seconds before he saw the flag. That was a fun one. Benjamin Morrison's interception against Clemson was pretty awesome. Will Fuller's post route touchdown against USC was pretty cool. And that was one of my most memorable for a couple reasons. So back then, Notre Dame would actually allow me to video the game and watch the game. I don't know that they didn't know I was doing it, but they let us do it. So Angela was up top with a video camera, and she would kind of record the all 22 version of the game. And it was just so I could watch it at home and break it down. And so like USC went on that long drive, and she was having some issues with the camera. So in between breaks, this is the old press box. So you walk up top and went up there and was helping her get squared away on the new camera. And they were getting close to that next series starting. So I was like, I'll just stay up here and watch this series, and then I'll go down between series or if there's a timeout or something. So that first throw to Will Fuller, it was one of those cool moments. One of my favorite moments inside of a stadium is the crescendo explosion moment. And so there's cheering and they're going to start the series, but you don't want to be too loud when your team's on offense. And as the ball leaves Deshaun Kaiser's hand and the crowd like kind of immediately sees that Will Fuller's open, there's like this kind of growing roar. And the minute Will Fuller hauls in that pass, the place just goes nuts. That was a pretty cool moment to experience as a fan. So thinking of the last 15 years, 2018, no really memorable plays. 2019, 2020. Ian Book hitting Avery Davis on that post route against Clemson in 2020 was a pretty memorable play. That was a huge play. A lot of people forget that wasn't a touchdown. Ian had to and Avery had to hook up again on the next play for the touchdown. It wasn't a given that they were going to score there. There wasn't a lot of time left. But that post route was huge because it was just kind of like, oh, man, you lost another one. You should have won. And then when he hit that throw, you're like, okay, this is huge. That was a pretty memorable play. Jalen's tackle for loss against Michigan in 2013. No, it was 2014. The one where he just – or was that Texas? I can't remember what it was. I thought it was Michigan. We just kind of explode from the backside and just makes a freaky play. That was one of my more favorable ones. Harrison Smith interception against Utah was huge. Robert Blanton's blocked punt against Utah was huge. Chris Tyree's kick return against Wisconsin was big time. That's one that definitely stands out. Julian Love's pick 6 against Michigan State was a big memorable play. Sean Crawford had another one that game too, that where he knocks the ball out of LJ Scott's hands right near the goal line. It was 21-7. Notre Dame was controlling the action so far, but if Michigan State scores there kind of late in the second quarter, it's 21-14. It's a little different ball game, but Crawford knocks the ball out, recovers it in the end zone. The offense goes down and scores, and it's 28-7. It's ball game. And they were filling out of that stadium in the third quarter. It was amazing. I loved it. But that was a big play. That was a huge play by Sean. Like, that was just a big moment because you didn't know what – like, because where we were – so, like, the play is happening to our left and away from us. So we're on the kind of the opposite goal line area. So you don't really see what happens at first. And then you see, like, guys scrambling for the ball, and you're like, wait a minute, what just happened? And it was a pretty intense play. So that was a big time play. So just off the top of my head, those are some I'm trying to think. 22. We talked about. Let's see here. Thinking of the 22 season. Any memorable plays? I talked about Morrison's pick 6. Tyler Buckner hitting Braden Lindsey for that big play against South Carolina was a huge play, especially seeing it live. Last year, Audrick's 80-yard touchdown run against NC State was pretty memorable because, you're sitting there in the press box for a couple hours and they're not playing. And then you come out in the first play, just houses it. And you're like, all right, they're going to be all right. They're going to be all right this game. So that's another memorable one for me. So those are all some good ones. Just off the top of my head to kind of – you guys can see my offensive bias with those selections as well. I'm not going to lie. Jimmy Page with a super chat. By the way, Jimmy, I saw you asking boards.archbreakdown.com. Membership is $4.99 a month. So it's literally what you paid for the super chat right there. It's $49.99 a year, or you can join a booster club. So boards.archbreakdown.com. Definitely want to check that out, man. Jimmy Page said, great show as always, BD. Thank you, Jimmy. Loaded question. What's the impact NL has made on recruiting as far as Notre Dame goes? Go Irish. It's made a huge impact. It's made Notre Dame a player. Like, Notre Dame is very competitive in the NIL sphere. What Notre Dame is not going to do is, and this is just a for instance, Notre Dame is not going to get a job for a parent of a recruit. They're not going to get a job for a relative, a sister, just randomly speaking, of a recruit. They're not going to pay off an influencer for a kid $50,000 to get in the kid's ear and convince him to come to Notre Dame. That they're not going to do that. Are they going to be up and like kind of up front with NIL opportunities? Absolutely. They're going to be up front with those opportunities, but they're just not going to go down that road because it's cheating. It's not legal. And if you've got to get a kid's dad or mom or sister a job for that kid to come play for you, I don't want that kid to come play for me, because this is what people have to understand. players like that will only play for you because you bought them. I'm okay with NIL. I'm okay if Notre Dame, this is a chat I was having with somebody on a private message. I'm okay if Notre Dame gives a kid the highest NIL package out there. That's okay. That's fine. If it's a legitimate NIL package, I'm okay with that. I'm okay if they're playing the NIL match game. That's the rules. That's what you need to do. But if the kid is picking you only because you gave him the most money, that's it. So, like, here's an example. I can share this story now. Jeremiah Love got huge offers to go to other schools out of high school and then this past off season. Yes, schools were reaching out to Jeremiah Love and a lot of Notre Dame players to go to convince them to jump in the portal in the transfer. It's clearly illegal, but NCAA does nothing about it, so it is what it is. Notre Dame did not give him the biggest package, but they gave him a big enough package that the family was comfortable with it. And that but they felt that Notre Dame offered so much value, the degree from Notre Dame offered so much value that it brought its own equation into it. And the family was smart enough to factor that in, combined with the actual money that he was going to get. If all Jeremiah Love cared about was Notre Dame offered me more than everybody else, guess what would happen every single offseason, if not during the season? Kids like that are then going to say, I want more. I know I signed a deal, to give me this, but I want more because this school is offering me this amount. And with the portal being the way that it is, where kids can just jump in the portal whenever they want, what's to keep a kid from playing that game every offseason? There's nothing that's going to stop them from doing that. And you're seeing it now. Mike Gundy talking about, like, stop coming to me to ask for more money. Like, the season started. You agreed to this. This is where you're at. Let's go play some ball. Hey, you know what, coach? If you don't pay, if all the kid cares about is money, if that's all he cares about, he didn't come here to get an education, win championships, do this, do that, all that. Here's what some of those kids are going to do. Got a big game this weekend, coach. Real big game this weekend. I think you might want to maybe give me a little bit more money, or I may not want to play this weekend. If you don't think that's happening in football and basketball right now, you're mistaken. You're sadly mistaken. I know for a fact it is. Not at Notre Dame, but it's definitely happening where kids are saying, like, look, I'm holding out either till you pay me more money or you pay me, period. That's all. I mean, that's more legitimate to me. If a school offers, agrees to pay you a certain amount of money and you're there now a month into the season, they haven't given you any money, they may be screwing you over. Your only recourse may not be to play, but you're going to have some of these kids say, hey, look, if you don't give me a little, 10 grand, I may not feel like playing this weekend. If all a kid cares about is who can give me the most amount of money, then that's not a kid you win with. Now, if a kid's going to say, hey, I value this, 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 and this, I need you guys to give me the best NIL package you can give because I have a family to take care of and this is generational life-changing money that this other school's offering me, that's a different conversation. But if it's like, look, I'm going to go to the highest bidder, I don't want any part of that kid. Notre Dame is giving themselves a chance to be competitive and land kids like Jeremiah Love, kids like Kingston Viliama-Asa, kids like Dallas Golden, elite football players, guys that NIL certainly matters to them, and it should matter to every kid. If you are not at all interested in NIL, either A, you come from a very wealthy family and you just don't really care about that, which is fine, or B, you're not really thinking about the opportunities to set yourself up and for future success. Every kid should have some level of concern about NIL. Everyone. And you should have some goals to maximize your opportunities as long as you understand there's a lot more to this, especially nowadays with how much everything costs. Yeah, look, that $1 million isn't going to go as far as it used to go, right? I mean, my wife and I bought our house. We closed it in December of 2016. Our house is now doubled in price. It hasn't doubled in value per se. Things usually don't get more expensive. They get older when it comes like cars and property and things like that. But that's just kind of where things are. Like my parents were thinking about buying a house. I said, look, you don't buy a house right now because the house will never you'll never get the value for it that you're going to pay for it now. That's just the reality of it. So that's the money that you're making it's not going to last you forever. Nobody's paying you enough money to last you forever. So you need to make sure that you're doing things to prepare yourself to be successful beyond just that payment that you're getting. Those are the kind of kids that Notre Dame wants. Those are the kind of kids that Notre Dame is getting. You're right. You don't think Mark Zachary cared about NIL? You don't think Dallas Golden and Jadon Blair cared about NIL? You don't think Anthony Sacca cares about NIL? You don't think that Christopher Burgess cares about NIL? You don't think that James Flanagan cares about NIL or Will Black or Owen Streber? Of course they do, but it's not the driver. And Notre Dame is able to, and I said this going into to NIL is going to start. There's a lot of kids that sometimes need the money that you couldn't compete with in the past. They understand the value of it. They were raised to understand the value of education. They were raised to understand the value of growing as young men, but they also are in the reality that my mom who raised me, who is giving me all this instruction on how to be a man, or my father that raised me, that how to be a man and what to value and how to treat people properly. And you should value education. Hey, they taught me all those things. But my mom also just lost her job, and my dad also lost his job, or my dad's battling something, and my you know what I mean? Like, you don't think those things are matter. I remember when Jamion Franklin went through that, when his mom and dad both battled cancer, right? Like a kid like that, if he's going into high school, he may say, look, I got to make some tough decisions here. Like, I want to go get an education here, but this school's offering me money that's going to allow me to go pay for what's going on with my parents. Notre Dame couldn't compete with those kids anymore. Now they can. Now they can do things to help that kid take care of his family, but he still now gets the opportunity to go play at a place like Notre Dame, get a degree from a place like Notre Dame. There's a lot of kids out there like that. A lot of kids out there like that. And Notre Dame needs to focus on those kids, not the kid that says, okay, this school offered me $1 million. What do you got? What do you got to offer? You're not going to go past $1 million? Cool, I'm going to go over here because they're paying me the most. You're not going to win with guys like that. Not very often. And not with that guy, because that guy's going to probably be gone in a year because he's going to go to the highest bidder somewhere else in the portal. That's just the reality of it. So just not trying to win with guys like that. The kind of kids that Notre Dame can win with, NIL is allowing them to be competitive for. And that's been a game changer for them. Absolutely. Super chat from Coolin Turner. Thank you for very much. I hope I pronounced your first name right. If I didn't, I apologize. Living in Colorado, I love to see Notre Dame play in Boulder or Salt Lake. Thoughts about those matchups? You know, I wouldn't mind playing at Boulder. I don't know what their field is like. I know they used to have turf. I think they have field turf now, I would imagine. But it's beautiful out there. It really is. My wife and I used to live out in Colorado. Actually, there's a tweet the other day about how Jaden Ivey got baptized and is now a Christian, which I just made my day. But I started thinking about when I got baptized. I actually got baptized in the South Platte River out behind Denver Seminary. One of my professors at seminary baptized me. Don Payne, big Texas fan, great guy. But we would drive. We got engaged out in Estes Park, and to drive from where we lived in Colorado, or where she lived in Colorado, because I hadn't moved out yet. I didn't move out until after we got married. But to drive from where she lived and then where we lived out to Estes Park, you have to drive kind of around Boulder, and it's beautiful. I mean, the mountains. It's a really gorgeous place. That'd be a cool place to play. I wouldn't mind playing there. I wouldn't mind playing at whatever the name of the Broncos field is either. But if you're going to go out there, I'd rather play in Invesco. Playing at Utah, I don't have as much interest in that, to be honest with you, as I would playing in Colorado. And that's just more personal. But I think my wife would disagree. My wife would love it if if Notre Dame played at Colorado or at Salt Lake City, and they would prefer, or Utah. And I think she'd probably prefer that game be played in November, so that way she could go do some snowboarding out there, because she hasn't been able to do any snowboarding at some mountains like that. There's a place up in Michigan she would go to this past year. I got her a pass, and she would go up, a couple days a week, go snowboard, but she would love to go back up to some of those bigger mountains and snowboard. She actually used to do ski patrol, and she did it on a snowboard, I believe. But yeah, she loves that kind of stuff. So my wife, see, there she is. Yep. So yes, snowboarding. So she would prefer that the game be played in later in the year, so she could go snowboarding. But I would much rather play Colorado than Utah. Just not sure why. I don't really have a good explanation for you, to be honest with you. Just kind of a feeling. Felonious McGee, Dr. Felonious McGee. In week 1, do you think Denbrock will use more heavy sets to help the inexperienced O-line, or 5 wide type open sets with motion to give Riley in the skill positions more space to ID and miss tacklers? Very simple answer to that. Yes. Okay. I know what you're saying to me right now, but I asked 2 different questions, and I said, I know that. I don't think there's one. I'm being kind of funny here, but trying to be anyway. Don't know if I'm accomplishing it or not. But when I look at it, there's just not one way to do that. if another team is good, you're not going to just beat them one way. You're not going to go out there and go 12 personnel and just like, all right, we're good now. I mean, you don't have your blocking tight ends are good, but they're not that good. Or it's like, okay, well, we put Eli Raritan out there, so Nick Scourton's toast, Shamar Turner's toast, because we got Cooper Flanagan on him. That doesn't work that way. It's got to be all of it. It's got to be about misdirection. It's got to be about your read zone concepts. It's got to be about how you run at them with help. It's how you run away from them with help or without help. It's how you do things with motions and how you do things with misdirection and how you do things with your quarterback run game and your quarterback RPO game and different things like that. You've got to have a plan, a plan to go at that with a lot of different things. Now, that doesn't mean you got to run 47 different run concepts, but it's more about alignment, personnel, and pre-snap movements that cause them to think about what they're doing. And that's really kind of where I'm coming from on that. So it's a good question. I just think you need to do a little bit of all of it. John A1, does the interior of the 2024 offensive line have a chance to be elite? Left guard to right guard, part 1. So I'll answer that one first because the answer requires that. To be elite in 2024, I don't know if it is going to be elite. First of all, I don't know who the left guard is going to be yet. Maybe it's Rocco. Maybe it's going to be Coogan again. Maybe it's going to be Sam Pendleton. Maybe it's Sullivan Absher. Maybe it's somebody different throughout the entire season. I mean, I'm not ready to throw Billy Strouth and Ashton Craig into that category yet. I think it's got a chance to be really good. I certainly expect it to be better than it was last year, but elite, I'm not sure it's going to be there yet. Next year, John, I absolutely expect it to be elite next year. I think it's going to be it's going to go from, promising and good in 3 games last year to really good this year to elite next year. That's kind of how I see it playing out. And then John says, if the interior of the O-line is elite, but the O-tackle position is just average, how does that affect Riley Leonard specifically and the run game overall? Well, I've said in the past, if I'm going to be struggle somewhere, I'd rather struggle at tackle than up the middle, because there's more things. And this kind of goes back to the question that Dr. Felonius McGee asked. There's more things that I can do as a coach to help my tackles in the run game than my interior guys. And if my interior guys are really good, it even gives me more options there. If it is elite, or as I predicted, really good, even if it's not elite, it allows you to say, okay, we can do more movement stuff with that. With a guy like Anthony Knapp, for example, let's say he starts at left tackle, Emil Wagner starts at right tackle. Yeah, they're not the biggest guys, but they're both pretty good athletes. Well, last year I thought it was kind of silly to do a lot of pin and pull stuff. This year, maybe you're more suited for that, because if you start from left to right, Knapp, Pendleton, or Absher, Craig, Strouth, and Wagner, it's a small line, especially at tackle, but it's a really athletic line. Now you're more suited to maybe do some of that pin and pull stuff. Now you're more suited to maybe use your tight end to now crack down and take out the defensive tackle. And we're going to pitch that sucker right out of him on a toss sweep or toss crack, or we're going to run right outside of him on a buck sweep or something like that. And now Anthony Knapp's not blocking a defensive end. We have leveraged that end with our tight end, which means that one of the advantages to a pin and pull concept, especially if you're undersized, is I don't have to blow you off the ball. I just have to get in between you and where I'm trying to go. And of course, I need to do that with as much toughness and force as possible, but I got to make sure you don't go over top of me, and I got to try to hold you in place as best I can. I don't got to move you, because we're using our blocking to create a gap in the in the run, to create a run lane in a specific place, right? Well, now Anthony Knapp is getting on the perimeter. He's blocking a corner or safety or a linebacker, right? I mean, we're going to do things as an offense where I'm going to if I'm the OC, where I'm going to use my tight ends to kind of come and get some angles and do some split flow, where I'm going to send Anthony Knapp up to the second level, let him go block a linebacker. And now all I need my tight end to do is just kind of get in that guy's way. You've got an inside out concept. We just need him to not crash down on the outside. with Riley Leonard at quarterback. Hey, if that guy wants to crash down, then I'm just going to send Anthony Knapp or Emil Wagner up to the second level. They're going to combo block up to the second level, and we're going to leave that guy unblocked, and we're going to deal with him with our orbit motions, our burst motions, our read zone concepts and bootlegs and things like that, where, hey, you want to just crash off on that thing and try to blow our tight ends up, cool. We're going to run read zone, and I'm going to run outside of you, or I'm going to run read zone, and we're going to run outside, and you try to take over our back, and now I'm outside, and it's me and the tight end on one guy. Can't stop both of us. So there are a lot of things you can do to protect your tackles in that type of situation, and that's why I'm not as panicked about it as some people are. If you're getting your butt kicked at guard, there's not a lot you can do. Go watch the Duke game last year. They just got dominated up the middle, and there's nothing you can do as a play caller. I really don't know what you can do right now. Just pray and cross your fingers that at some point in time in the game, they go away from this. And that's exactly what Duke did. That Duke went into their not prevent, but 2-minute defense, which wasn't nearly as aggressive or big or as physical, and it allowed Notre Dame to get in space. And that's why Notre Dame won the game. So I just look at it and say, boy, those are things you can do that help you. But if you're good up the middle, John, to your point, it gives you even more options of things that you can do, especially movement wise, moving forward. Okay. From BK's last brain cell, being extremely realistic, fair, unbiased. I feel that I always am. I don't ever feel that I give you an unrealistic, unfair, or biased view. If Riley Leonard was not at Notre Dame going into spring, who, in your opinion, would be the opening day starter for Notre Dame, and what would the game plan look like? I honestly don't know. I mean, you'd think it'd be Steve Angeli because he's the veteran, and they kind of just gave him the number 2 job this fall camp. I would think, honestly, there'd be a more open competition. Honestly, I think that's where they'd be. There would have been a more open competition if they were looking for a starter. Who would the starter be? I have no idea. What would the game plan? I'll tell you this. I'd be a lot more concerned going into this Texas A&M game if I didn't have Riley Leonard at quarterback, because a lot of things that I can do to neutralize my issues at tackle require me to have a mobile quarterback. And if I didn't have a mobile quarterback, some of those options aren't there. And I'd be concerned about that. So I actually don't know my answer would be like that. What would the game plan look like? A lot more conservative, a lot more geared towards the running game where you've got to utilize your I'll tell you this, it'd also probably be a lot more 12 personnel because you'd have to get your second tight end in the game to protect the edge and create more run game gaps. Would most likely be where they would, we'll see. BK's last brain cell, hard to find a Notre Dame transfer out that has excelled at their new home. Name a transfer that has the best opportunity to change this trend. Excel. Well, I know Tobias Merriweather's, I see on Twitter, he's constantly making 75-yard touchdown after 75-yard touchdown in practice of Cal. I think he's got a shot to do that. I think Rico Flores has a chance to be a good player at UCLA. Look, I think Rico got a little too much hype last year, and I don't think he should have been thrust in the main role that he did. But I like Rico Flores. He's a good football player. He's a 4-star kid to me, top 250 kind of kid to me. I think that's a good pickup for UCLA. He's got a shot to do some things there. I hope Braylon James is able to change that trend. I like Braylon a lot. Love his family. Great family. Would love to see him be successful at TCU. Yeah, I think Chris Tyree can be good at Washington or Virginia. I don't know how. I just got to see it. I don't know how they're going to use him. He's got to be used the right way. I just know that I hope he's successful there. I really like Chris Tyree. And again, another kid who comes from a great family. Would love to see Zeke Correll have a great last year at NC State. Again, another great kid. Comes from a good family, like his family. I'm just trying to think. I'm kind of rooting for all. I think all those kids have a chance. I think Nana could be a good player at TCU this year. This year's situation is a little bit different because they didn't have a lot of kids that transferred out because of some of the issues of the past. Kids getting in trouble, kids not having good grades, kids having bad attitudes. Like Notre Dame had a receiver transfer out recently, then didn't do anything wherever he transferred to because as talented as he was, the kid just had a terrible attitude and just didn't want to work and cared more about extracurricular things than he did about becoming the best football player can be. And guys like that aren't going to be successful going somewhere else. They had some kids leave this year that were kind of forced out. So they weren't. It's not that they couldn't play anymore. They just were ready, to go on to younger guys, or not even force out like you can't come back, but like, hey, you're not going to start, and that would cause some guys to leave. So I think the crop of transfers out this year is pretty good, and not all those guys are going to play well, but I think all those guys have a chance to play well, and kind of change that trend a little bit. So it's a good one. Zach Martin says, given the youth of the offensive line, do you think something similar to the two-back set with a lead blocker, a la the Ohio State game, would make sense for week 1? No, I don't think so, because I think now you're playing right into Texas A&M's hands. I think by putting another guy in the box, you're now getting Texas A&M to get another guy in the box to stop the run, which is the best thing that they do. So I don't want to do that. I mean, there may be times for that, but I'd rather just use my second back, not as a lead blocker, but to get on the perimeter. Maybe if we can tuck that linebacker in and run some kind of read zone. So like, let's say I got a running back to my right and a running back to my left, and I'm going to read off of that backside backer. So I'm going to run inside zone. And if that backside backer squeezes down, I am pulling that sucker and I'm throwing a swing screen out to my running back, because we now have that guy out leveraged. If he stays out wide, we're accounting for that backside defensive end. We're not reading off him, so we're blocking him. So now if that guy stays outside, now we got an inside zone, and if we can crease through that inside zone, we got a hole back there because that guy's now worried about that screen. I'd rather do things like that to protect your offensive line, and now all of a sudden A&M's not crashing your box nonstop. But if you put a guy in there and you're just crashing it, they're going to do exactly what Ohio State did. Hey, we're seeing this now. We're just going to blow it up and crash it. So I don't know that that's necessarily the way that I would go with that at all. But I understand the thought behind it, though, Zach. I do. And that's why I think there might be a little bit more 12 personnel in this game than maybe they would have used previously. But I still think the best thing to do is to spread them out, get the ball on the perimeter, widen out the backers, do things to slow down the pressures. And if you can find some success that way, I think that's going to give you your best chance to have success. Andrew Gilmore, what kind of chances do you give Dabo and Clemson in terms of pulling an upset versus Georgia? I think they got a shot. I'm not predicting it, but I think they got a shot. Look, here's the thing about Clemson. I think Clemson's one of the few teams that can actually hang with the big boys of Georgia. Now, I don't know if they can enough to win, but that D-line at Clemson is going to be really good this year. Their offensive line finished the year on a strong note. Matt Luke's a really good offensive line coach. I think they're going to be big and physical up front. I think that's going to be good. They've got a big physical back. They're healthy on the perimeter, which will help them a ton. Some of their really young freshman sophomore receivers from last year are now sophomores and juniors. They're healthy again. They've had some guys banged up the last couple years. Their secondary's young and talented, but a little bit of a question mark. Their linebackers are pretty good. It just comes down to, honestly, if Cade Klubnik plays well or not. That's really what it boils down to. If Cade Klubnik can play well, I think Clemson can make this a game and maybe pull off an upset. If Cade Klubnik doesn't make a big jump in year 3, then I don't think they're going to be able to win that game. I think your quarterback's going to have to make some plays to be able to beat Georgia in that type of spotlight game. That's really what it comes down to for the whole season for Clemson. Is if they're going to be the team I think they're capable of being, it's going to come down to Cade Klubnik. There's no doubt. Muhammad Abdi, Brian, ESPN, that's from Jordan Reed. Jordan Reed article states there are 11 draftable Notre Dame players on 2025 draft. Is that the most since you've covered the team? The comment was not draftable. The comment was that's how many he projected to get drafted. There are other draftable players that I think are out there. So let's just kind of go with who he thinks he is best guess, because he didn't list them all. Let me say Riley Leonard, Chris Mitchell, Bo Collins. See here, I'm trying to think of some. R.J. Oben, Howard Cross, Riley Mills, Jordan Patel-Ho, Jack Kaiser, Jordan Clark, Benjamin Morrison, Xavier Watts, Rod Hurd, all Mitchell Evans. That's 13 draftable players. Now, not all of them will get drafted. That's why he only has 11. And, and maybe they'll have 10. It's not, I don't know if it's the highest I've ever seen. It's close, certainly close. And 11 would be the highest of the modern draft era for Notre Dame. They haven't had 11 drafted since before the draft was there was more. Well, actually, I got to go back and read the article. I think that they might have tied it one year back in the early 90s. I'd have to go look, but it's up in amongst the top of since the draft went to 7 rounds. It'd certainly be the most of the last 20 years, easily. I think the most then is like 9. So it's a lot. It says a lot about their talent. And Jordan Reed's very good. He's very fair. He doesn't get into favoritism. Oh, I'm going to say this about Georgia because it's Georgia. He does a pretty good job of watching the film and saying, this is what I see, and this is my opinion. Right or wrong, this is my opinion. Hi, Brian. If you could be on the voting committee for any award in college football, which would you choose and why? Award as in Lombardi, Nagurski, Maxwell, Heisman, etc. I'd say probably Heisman, because I would want to at least guarantee that there's one voter that in my opinion, looks at the award the way that it's supposed to be looked at and not in what it has become. So I wouldn't care about who is the best running back or quarterback on one of the best teams, but who's the best player in college football. Yeah, it'd definitely be Heisman. I'd love to be a Heisman voter. I'm not going to lie to you. Carrie Later, been watching since Louisville last year. Thank you. Do you think that USC losing to LSU and Notre Dame affects renewing the game? Don't know that what the temp is at USC, but would hate to lose our biggest rivalry. That would suck. I don't know that there's much of an appetite to lose that game. And honestly, I think what's gonna impact Notre Dame coming off the schedule won't be what happens to LSU and Notre Dame. It'll be more so of how do they handle the Big 12 or the Big 10, excuse me. If they go out and lose 3 games in their league and they kind of get physically beat up, they may say, hey, look, we need to soften our non-conference. But if they kind of roll through the Big 10 and have some success this year, maybe they'll lose 1 game, then it may say, hey, look, let's make our non-conference, other than Notre Dame a little bit lighter. But from what I've heard, I don't know that there's a lot of people in positions of ultimate decision-making that really have an interest in getting rid of that game. I hope that stays the same, but that would be a travesty, in my opinion. Absolutely a travesty. Paulie B, I'm going to get last couple because I have to get off here a little around 3:15 and go help take care of Rita, who's home by now, by the way. But I want to get to a few of these. I'm going to try to get to them as many as I can. So I'm going to get to this one and then got some super chats and try to finish up with some others. But Brian, what is your biggest concern about this year's team? Also, what are you most looking forward to this season? Go Irish, beat A&M. Paulie, it's offensive line. I mean, that's my biggest concern. It is. I think it's fair to be concerned about the offensive line. No question. My only pushback is I think there's this assumption that because it's just going to be awful. I don't think it's going to be awful. The question is it going to be good enough to beat the best teams on your schedule? That's a very fair question. Absolutely fair question. And it's my biggest concern. So when I push back against people freaking out about the O-line, it's not that I don't think people have a valid reason to be concerned about it. I absolutely do. It's that I think people are jumping off of a cliff when they shouldn't be jumping off of a cliff in regard to freaking out, just woe is us and it's over and just forfeit the A&M game because you can't block their ends and just, stay healthy and try to go beat Northern Illinois. It's sort of that crazy panic overreaction. That's what I'm pushing back against because that's too extreme. Just like it's extreme to say, oh, they're going to be perfectly fine and they're going to be a great O-line because Anthony Knapp was ranked whatever. And I don't care that they've only got 290-pound tackles. They're going to be just fine, even though there's no evidence of a team having an elite offensive line with 290-pound tackles in the modern era. Right? That's a narrative. It's a legitimate concern. But how that concern is answered is going to tell us a lot about this team. But I just don't think it's something that's like, oh, let's go 8-4 this year now because of the O-line. I don't think it's going to be that. And what am I most looking forward to this season? I'm most looking forward to the offense because I want to see, is it as good as we hope it's going to be? Is Denbrock the guy? Is the talent what we hope it is? Are the running backs as good as we think they are? Is the speed of receiver as good as I think that it is? Is Riley Leonard as good as I think that he is? It's that. It's just I want to see if this offense is as good as we expect it. Because if it is, then this team is going to be really fun to watch. Really, really fun to watch. Let Manager 1 with a super chat. Thank you very much for that. Notre Dame wins 34-10. What's the national narrative? Well, there's going to be two national narratives. There's going to be one from everywhere else and then one from the South. The one from the South is going to be, man, Mike Elko's got a much tougher task ahead of him than we thought. This A&M team is not as good as we thought it was going to be. They just don't have the playmakers on the perimeter. They don't have the speed on the secondary to really compete against the other SEC teams. I mean, look what Notre Dame did to them. That's a much bigger rebuild than we thought it was going to be. That will be the narrative in the South. The narrative everywhere else will be, holy crap, this is a really dangerous Notre Dame team. Because here's why I say that. In the South, it's always protect your own, right? Protect your own. Everywhere else, it's if Notre Dame is legitimately good, we are going to ride that horse as long as we can and make as much money off of it as possible. And then there's also the people in the North that are being more willing to be objective if Notre Dame is good. Hey, look, I don't like Notre Dame, but man, they're really flipping good. And so I think you'll see a two narratives, North and West, compared to what's said in the South. So I think it'll be a very, very different narrative. Like, let's say an Ohio State fan is sitting there thinking Notre Dame sucks, and Notre Dame goes out there and blasts Texas A&M, and you're like, hey, you know what? Like, maybe Notre Dame's a little better than we think. Whereas an Alabama fan's going to be like, oh, A&M sucks. How do you lose to Notre Dame? Notre Dame's terrible. How do you get people? That's exactly how SEC fans are going to react. It won't be, maybe Notre Dame's a little better than we thought they were. It'll be, oh, they suck. Like A&M's terrible. We're going to kill A&M. So that'll be the two narratives on that particular one. Got another super chat from Randy Hernandez. Thank you, Randy, very, very much. Hello, Brian. I still might cling. I am very excited about a banner. We may be in store of a very special 70s. Yeah, I hope we see that very soon, Randy. Absolutely hope we see that very soon. I don't know if this is a championship caliber team, Randy. I don't. I hope it is. I really hope that it is, but I do think it's going to be a fun team to watch. That's about the only thing that I could confidently say about this football team is I think it's going to be fun. I really do. Jimmy Page with a super. Oh, we actually already got that one. And then we got one from, we got that one from Kulan too. So we did get those super chats in. Wanted to make sure we got all of those. I'm going to try to find one more from here. Any medical updates? Nothing new. We won't find that out till the Monday press conference, so we'll get closer to that. Here's a good one, Ronnie Reeves. If you couldn't have Riley Leonard at quarterback, would you rather have Conor Weigman or DJ Uiagalelei? That's a great question, Ronnie. And my answer is not who's the better talent. I would go with DJ Uiagalelei, not because I think he's a better talent. I think Conor Weigman has a chance to be a really good quarterback. Now, he's got a lot to prove, but I think he's got a chance to be a really good quarterback in a year, maybe even later this year, but definitely next year and the year after that. But I think I've got my quarterbacks of the future. It's either CJ or Kenny. I need a guy to get us through this season. That would be my mantra if I was Notre Dame, is I need to get a guy that's a good leader, tough kid that can get us through this season, get the ball where it's supposed to get to, and then we can move on after that. And that's kind of where I would want to go. And, I think that would be my answer. It's not that I think he's a better player than Conor Weigman, but it's just he's a veteran, he's experienced, and he's only got a year left. And that would be the key. And then the last one from Christopher Hardy, what era of history is your favorite to study? It's the Revolutionary period, the 50 years leading up to it, and then the actual Revolutionary period, and then the probably first 15, 20 years coming out of it. That is definitely my favorite era to study. So that's going to do it for today's show, everybody. There's a lot of questions I didn't get to. I am really sorry, but like I said, we got a dog at home. Rita's home. I'm going to try to show her to you guys here on one of these shows here this next few days. Hopefully coming up, we can get her up and down some stairs, but I got to go up and get her some medicine and take care of her. So I have to get going. So I do apologize for that I couldn't get to all those questions. A lot of great questions. If you're a message board member, you know what? If one of you guys could maybe start a message board post, mailbag follow-up, and if you had a question in there that I didn't get to, go throw it in there. throw any other mailbag question that maybe you haven't put up yet. And then later tonight, I'll go through and answer all of them on the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So again, I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions that I needed to get to and wanted to get to, but got a little bit of a hard out today. So folks, thanks for being with me today. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. And as I said, if you haven't done so, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. And as always, you can find all of our free written content at simply irishbreakdown.com. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see all of you again very, very soon at Irish Breakdown and on the Irish Breakdown podcast.